where we can no longer afford to do what we were brought here to do. Our time has come, and it's on you. We have to do what we were sent here to do.
That's our news for tonight. I'm Sean Jackson.
And I'm Micah Davis. Good night.
Black women, and then he said Jinx Morton doesn't date white women, and then he posed the question: Jinx Morton is, he said, fill in the blank.
Man. Okay.
A man.
And the answer, of course, in the show, we have smart people here, but in the show, everyone said gay, but he's married. And his point was our view, our negative view of one another. And the interesting thing is, because Sister with Wisdom here said that, I know that more you were going to say gay, but she yelled out married first. Oh, you're going to lie now like you're My name is Johan Powell, and they asked me to moderate for a short time a little discussion. I think this is the type of film you have to have a discussion. So I want us to have a discussion. I don't know if they're going to have to pass a mic around for folk, but okay. They won't, so if you stand up, please project your voice. This is not a Black Panther rally, so this is not the moment to recruit everybody for your organization, but I do want people to say how you feel, such a serious group. My material is not working. But give everybody your view, because I think we have to talk about these films and stuff like this to get a perspective. And what I want to do is start it out with this. I don't think this is a feel-good movie. This is not a movie that makes you feel good about black folk, even though there's some things I think we saw and we learned for the first time. But I think it's a thought-provoking movie. And my hope is that we leave here today and we don't just sit here and talk, because I've been in many of these types of meetings, everybody talk and we get fired up and then we leave and we go do the exact same things before we came. But my thought here and what I'm hoping today is that each one of us go out and use this to make the first step to make a change, your personal step. So that means to say something to somebody about this. And I think it's because it's thought-provoking, the one thing that touched me in this movie was how come we believe all the negative things that we hear about ourselves? It is so easy to believe the negative things. Are there more black men in jail or in college? And like 99% of the people will say jail. Only the few smart folk that know it may be a trick question come up and say something else. But the reality is we tend to think that. And we've heard that. And we repeat that because we heard it somewhere without challenging the information. So my thing is, why do we not challenge the negative information, but we will challenge the positive information? So the first question I want to throw out, now that I said my little 2 cents, that's what happens when you have the mic, you can say a little something. What are your thoughts on this film?
Well, I can tell you, for me, it was definitely an eye-opener, because I just used the same stat today in a conversation about the prison pipeline, and I just said it to somebody, and they said, "Wow, I didn't know that." Well, I just heard that and I repeated it. So for me, the big takeaway was that because we see something on CNN and we figure, well, it's CNN and I have a certain education, it must be real. We just got to check it out for ourselves.
It was actually a feel-good to me to know that I was being hoodwinked and it was just the opposite. Unfortunately, in my capacity in working with young brothers, I've used that same data, so I feel bad in utilizing that data as a method of telling them this is why y'all need to be down with me. When in reality, I need to learn how to turn those statistics, and that needs to be the next step. How do I learn to use the positive statistics as a motivating factor to young brothers and sisters who actually feel bad about the statistics that they've already heard.
It's a little dark in the back. Somebody was in the back, and Audrey, could you pick the people from now on?
I think this is a powerful film. I kind of equate him to, I don't know if some of y'all know Michael Moore. He's done films like Bowling for Columbine and things like that. I kind of equate him the same way, but towards black people. And I think that's something we need to push because Michael Moore, the way he does films, America wants to watch it. Everybody wants to see what he's doing, but nobody wants to watch and see what African Americans are doing in their communities and what's going on. And I think this is a way or a bridge, sort of like the same way he's going. I think it's powerful. I think it's something we definitely need to preach to our black men and black women. And this film needs to be perpetuated. It needs to be pushed forward. It needs to get out there and motivated. It needs to be seen by all. Because white people need to know what's going on. Black people need to know what's going on. Hispanics, Asians, they need to know what's going on in our communities as well. And not just what's posted on CNN and you know, with our president and Barack Obama and all that stuff. I just think they need to see what's going on so they can understand that the wool's not going to be pulled over our eyes anymore. It's not going to be any more lies anymore. The truth is here. Period.
Good evening, everybody. I can only speak for myself. One of the reasons why I believe so many of the stereotypes, number one, it gets said so often, but number two is any type of truth is buried. So no matter what venue I go to, a museum, wherever I go, the truth is rarely presented. So therefore, I really don't even have any choices in terms of what to believe. So this is good, at least for me, because I expect an oppressor to do what they do with the information, but I didn't know that maybe some of our best speakers have a negative perspective and is utilizing that in order to get paid. So that's what's new for me. I mean, that's what's new for me.
I think one of the things that I got from the film is something that my mentor, Frank Smith, taught me years ago, and he used to pound in my head, and that's to be a critical thinker, and to be a critical reader. And our problem is that we tend not to be critical. We tend to believe that if it's written, it's true, because how could they write something that's a lie? But the interesting thing, if you study history, throughout history, there are always lies in history, so that they can promote a particular viewpoint and a position. So I think let's gather from this to be critical thinkers and to pass that on in particular to our young people.
We have a gentleman in the back here. You just touched on something very important. As a transplanted New Yorker, I live in California now, and I had the good fortune to be in the Midwest, spend some time over there, and tutor some children. And what I have learned trying to help these children learn is that what's going through the education system, for those of you who have little children under 10 years, they are teaching children how not to succeed. And as someone who was considered gifted when I was a child and had the blessing of being around folks such as the people who put things like this together in a pilot program back in the 80s, I look at this stuff and I am enraged because I see what they're doing. And it was actually told, I believe it was Judge Joe Brown actually, and he said that incarcerating black youth is good for the economy. There are not enough jobs to go around, and they need a place to put the people who are not employed, who they really don't want to be employed, and they are setting us up at the earliest levels for that purpose. When I looked at some of those math instructions, I'm like, what is this? How are you ever going to learn how to add, subtract? How are you ever going to be a carpenter, an architect? What they're teaching these children. And I was really outraged at that, and what we really need to do is, I mean, if you look around, there aren't a lot of youth here. And that's a big problem for me, because when I see the youth, you know, me and my buddies run a recording studio, I see them all the time, doing what I really don't want to see youth doing. And we need to, as old people, not prejudge them so much, and just sit down and have these conversations with them. And instead of berating the trends and everything, we need to sit down and have these level-headed discussion so they can see where this stuff is coming from. They can understand where the speakers in the film and the speakers here are talking about how people are perpetuating things for them to latch onto, and they're only doing it to get paid. They know it's messy, and they don't do it in their private lives. I've seen so many entertainers, if I was sitting there and have a discussion about who does what, I mean, from eyewitness perspective, you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed how many college graduates are out here sagging their pants, acting like total idiots. And it's totally the opposite of how they live. They're in mansions, and they're in those mansions because they know what they're doing. And we need to know what they're doing. We need to know what we're doing and teach our children so they don't fall for other people's mess. You know, if somebody's going to be empowered, we need to be empowered and get the same kind of wealth that they've gotten, deceiving us, but knowing what we're doing and getting on a path to getting what we need to get and what we want to get instead of having somebody else's mess that they have already paid for us.
Let me ask this, do we believe, did you, in watching the film, do you believe the information that the film maker gave out, James Morton's information?
Yes.
I'm gonna check it out.
Right. Yeah.
See, now that's my point. When we heard all the other stuff, nobody wants to check anything out when we believe we're all in jail. We're going to check you out.
When you know better, you do better.
That's the truth.
But sir, he showed us.
Hang on a second.
Did he show us on the film?
I have to say this, I have a child who's a mixed race. And when I fill out his paperwork, the school districts want you to fill it out only as African American. Here he is. But my thing is, I fill out other, not because he's not African American or he's not black, because why are you labeling my child? No child should be labeled. And you know why they want everybody in this room that has kids in the new generation? Because they want the money like they showed in the film. They want me to label him so they can get the money. No. Teach my kid how to succeed in life, then I'll give you the money. That's what we need to know for our kids.
Going back to your first question as to why we believe the negative things, working with youth sometimes they present the notion that it's easier not to have to be great. So they'll say, well, I could wind up dead or in jail. Well, all my friends are dead or in jail. And I'll say, well, don't you have other friends? Because not all your friends are dead or in jail. Some graduate from college. Some went to work. Or some, you know.
Like billions of dollars being spent to create the statistics. Billions of dollars being spent to create the images. Then it's like billions and billions and billions are being spent. So when you saw the young people in the movie, in the documentary, and they were answering some of the questions, it's not by no surprise because they keep hearing the same thing over and over and over from the time that they were small. So it's another argument to come up with, like, how do you offset that when there's like so many billions of dollars being constantly spent to create exactly what we are talking about.
Yeah, this comes at a perfect time for me in my life. I mean, it's an excellent film. It should be played in every elementary school across the country.
Yes.
I have my two sons here, one 13 and one 17, one on the verge of going into college, and one, you know, I'm trying to instill in him his own self-esteem. Because I am also a transplanted from Brooklyn. I was one of those kids that I thought I'd wake up one day dead or in jail. So my mother actually bused me to another school because she told me that white people did not have a monopoly on intelligence. Okay? And once you gain knowledge, nobody can take it away from you. And that was the key. So what really hurt me to my heart was the profit-making venture it was in the separation of the black race. You know, the Steve Harveys of the world and things of that nature, because people are flocking to these books, but just ripping us apart. And that's what hurt me to my core. Because something like this should just crush a Django. You know, it should crush all these other films that are negative to our lifestyle. Because this is the actual truth. And yes, we need to fact check even his facts. Because critical thinking is the key.
I think one of the things that we should think about with respect to these movies is we see things, and it is so easy for us to believe things, because we've said a lot of stereotypes. I'm a lawyer, and I've heard many people say that they'd rather have a Jewish lawyer than a black lawyer. You know, Great Man once said, sometimes we think other folk ice is colder than our ice. You know, ice is ice. And I think that, you know, we do have to take a step. I think one of the things we got to understand is this problem is not a small problem. It's not an easy problem to change, because the things that we see today have been going on for many, many years. He just happened to decide to do more, and this is his second one, by the way. He did one, he had a different name for it, but he did, this is the part 2, and there's going to be a part 3. He's kind of following up on his concept. So I do think that, you know, we have to start. And my question is, what are we going to do now that you have this information? Because we all know that there is a problem. And many of us know what the problem is. But the question becomes, what are we going to do with this information? And individually, what are you going to do with this information?
Sure.
Yes, young man.
I think what I'm going to do with this information that I learned here today is compare it to what other people have told me in my past, because it's always good to ask questions. And if this one wouldn't exist, people didn't ask questions. See, people would just believe what other people have told them, like that black people were slaves. Like when black people were taken from their home, their country, in Africa and put into slavery, they were told that they were nothing. But they all knew that they started out as kings and queens. And that's what we all have to know now. And this movie has taught me to question things that I am always told. And now, when I look at certain things that people tell me and I question them, I know what's the truth and what's not the truth.
And the one thing I want to talk about is that word incarceration. See, the word incarceration means after being detained. That means after your court case over, you're proven guilty. Now you're incarcerated. People understand that they use words to play with us. See, every black man has been, mostly black men has been arrested. Just because you're arrested, don't mean you're guilty. Because you're detained, don't mean you're guilty. But once you're incarcerated, that means you've been proven guilty of a crime. And that's what we're getting caught up in the words they use. We're not breaking the words down, breaking what they say down to us. Another thing, like, we as adults, as mother and father, we go home to our sons and daughters and apologize to them. Because there's certain things we say to this generation. Oh, y'all a bad generation. Generation X, y'all out of control, y'all wilding out. But yet we see them. 1.4 million of them going to college. So we got to stick some things we say in our homes to them and look at them like, yo, I'm bad. I'm looking y'all in a negative light. So y'all can look at us as a negative light. So how can we get along with each other if we always go negative each other? It starts in the home. It starts right in the home and telling your sons and daughters that y'all can do good, because I got facts that y'all are doing good. It's a positive reinforcement. Because we did damage. The movie showed us, show good, but to me, it showed damage that we did as parents, as we do as guys walking the streets and seeing young men with their pants sagging. Yeah, his pants are sagging, but he might be going to college to get an education. So they're talking about bring up his pants, but then sit down and have a conversation with him, you might see that he's very intellect. But that's their thing right now. That's their style. So, because we got to get off of that, beating each other down.
We should talk to him, and we should tell him to pull up his pants.
Yeah, thank you. That's right.
The young lady had a question right here.
Well, I'm the director of a youth agency, of a youth organization that works here in Nassau County. And one of the most frustrating parts and heartbreaking, not just frustrating, probably heartbreaking aspects of my job is believing more in the kids than they do. And then having them battle me when I'm trying to let them know that I believe in them. And I'm trying to point out their strengths, and I'm trying to point out how great they are and the potential they have. And they literally battle me. And there's days that I go home and I'm literally, my son is here, he can vouch for this, I'm literally in tears because I'm like, this shouldn't be this difficult. This shouldn't be this hard. And you know, one of the things that I'm going to take away, and, you know, and when they talked about the deficits model, and as much as I preach, you know, trying to come from a strength perspective, I mean, I'm still guilty of doing, you know, and falling victim to what the system wants me to do, and still bring up the negative and harp on the negative sometimes in hopes that it will spark some sort of motivation. If I can't motivate you by telling you how beautiful and intelligent I think you are, maybe I just do need to do what they want me to do, and but what I think I'm going to take back to my organization and to my youth is to really not give up on focusing on the strengths that they have and making that my number one mission and message.
This gentleman here, and then.
How many parties I went to nobody have started fights? I've been in places that you shouldn't even be and no one started a fight there. But yet we tend to think that no matter where we go, we're going to start a fight. But I've been to football games and I've seen a whole lot of folk get into fights and none of them look like me. You just simply have to be more critical in our thinking. Or did you say one time? Eric?
I actually wanted to respond directly to the woman that just spoke. I work with young men. I want to tell you that you should be encouraged because what you're saying to them is a seed. Everything starts in seed form. And I work with young men for over, my organization is about 9 years old. There were young men who come back to me and tell me, Eric, I hear it. It's playing in my mind over and over again. Some young men that went to jail write me and tell me, now I hear what you were saying, so it's a seed. So sister, definitely be encouraged.
Jabari, got a question?
I wanted to say that one thing that really blew me away in the film was when I think he was the principal, when he was looking at the statistics,
yes.
He basically couldn't believe what he was seeing.
It's changing his view, yes.
Right, and being that he's someone who's touching young minds, and yet he's clueless in terms of what the real statistics are, which goes to what he was saying that, you know, it's a big problem, but it's a good thing for us to start doing it. One of the things that I wanted to basically ask everybody here to do is that when you go to your next PTA meeting, is to bring up these facts or at least tell the head of the PTA to go to that site and look at these statistics so that they could basically give it to the principal, or you yourself could go to the principal and let them know about it so that they could relay that information to the teachers.
Yeah, number one, go to the PTA meeting.
Right. That's one reason for us to go now. Now we have a reason to go.
I think keep in mind this too, when you saw the film, that one of the things happened is that that particular principal who had a different view of his, who kind of supported the shot study view, he mentioned something that was interesting. He said that he looked only at the graduation rate, so he didn't look at the dropout rate. One of the things that James Morton did is when he looked at these statistics, he looked at a variety of things. And then he also compared the dropout rate. Because that principal also agreed that there was a difference between graduation rates and dropout rates. But he never looked at it. And I think what I thought was very interesting, the guy brought up, and it's natural for all of us to think, if someone says that 50% of the people are graduating, it is natural for you to think that 50% have dropped out. But looking at this cohort scenario of how you look at information, this is critical thinking. He analyzed that information in a way, you've heard this before, people say you can make stats say anything you want. Right? That's right. Because you can look at it, it depends how you look at those statistics. And I just think it's important for us to start putting that in our mind. Dave?
Just to piggyback on that part, I actually thought the best part of that is that his brother went in there. He didn't want that brother to come off looking bad on the film, and he gave him an opportunity to say, listen, let me break this down to you for one more time. And really what that told me is that when people have access to information, and it allowed them to draw their own conclusion, because he didn't say anything. He just said, brother, I don't want you to be portrayed a certain way on this film. I want you to look at this. And then you draw your own conclusion. So that's what we need to focus on. And that's why actually, where can we show this again? Because this represents access. So you show it to other folks and let them begin to draw their own conclusions.
Just real quick, he alluded in the film to the 28% as it relates to black men in the household. How factual does anybody know was that particular number? Now I can stand up and my son graduated from Lincoln last year, Lincoln University. My daughter goes to Albany State in Georgia, HBCU. And my oldest daughter is in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's a hairstylist. Now, she meets that particular 1 to 3 or 1 to whatever that didn't go to college, but she's a professional in her own right. But I wasn't in the home. I love my wife. We're still married, but we separated 15 years, but we best friends. Was that 28% right? Does anybody know as it relates to that movie? Because he glossed over that. He talked about all those particulars.
But I think the point is this, you're touching on it, that's why we can't just take 28% and say we're not involved.
Well,
because it says a variety of things, but you were involved in your child's life. I've had this discussion, many debates with, unfortunately, a lot of young ladies about what men do and whether or not black men take care of their kids. Again, I know a whole lot of black men, and I got to tell you, about 95% of them take care of their kids.
98.
And there's about 5%. I'm talking about who I know. There's about 5% that may be on the shaky spectrum. But the thought process is that none of them do. So again, it's about the thinking and how we take information, how we use information, but more importantly, how do we accept what people tell us? And because it shapes our whole perspective. It shapes that's why our kids come and they're already defeated. Because if I tell you from the time that you can walk that you're ugly, no matter how beautiful you are, you're going to think that you're ugly. So we have to start working on our information. Barry, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand.
The gentleman back here in green.
Oh no, he's playing me off now. Okay. All right, roll in the back and then we come here.
Yeah, I just wanted to really point out something you said about critical thinking. I was taught from my father, who was very vigilant about my education. He said something that stuck with me my whole life. He said, you got to learn how to read between the lines. And I used to question him, what does that mean? It's like, you know, you got to look at what's not written. And I'll tell you real quick, you know, we remember in the 80s how hip-hop had started from basically a little street thing and just blew up. And you had all this conscious rap going on, and all of a sudden it switched. Then it was gangster music everywhere, and they made us think that this was the preferred style. But let me tell you what happened behind the scenes. If you'd have read between the lines, you'd have seen what was happening was dudes and dashikis went up to the executives, and they come out of the office with skull caps and 9mm because they were told, we're not giving you a deal like that, but we'll give you a deal like this. You know, so if you come out and you say this, we'll give you the budget money. If you come out and say that, no, you got to go home. And that's what was really happening. And then on the other side, if you had a TV show that was showing videos, or you had a radio show that was playing music, it was told to you, if you play this music, we'll give you funds, we'll give you ad monies and things of that nature. If you play that music, now we can't help you. You know, your ratings are going to fall. We can't support that. We're going to have to let you go. This is what was really happening. We were forced to believe something that appeared to be true because we heard it all the time. We heard all that music all of a sudden come in, and we thought, oh, that must be what people like. No, that's what they were forcing on us. And if we had stuck, a lot of people had stuck true to their guns, they would not have supported it. It would have been forced to fail. And that's what I believe is happening now. It's at a crossroads where people are not doing the mainstream thing. They can't stand it. They're not buying it. They're not supporting it. There's a crisis mode. They're not telling you there's a crisis, but I'm going to tell you right now as an insider in this business, there's a crisis. People are not buying. People are not going to these shows and spending this money. We are at a point where we can start changing the tide, not supporting it, not lighting it in our houses if we don't believe in it. You know, they are struggling, and when push comes to shove, we have the power to make those who are not supporting what we believe in, make them disappear instead of, you know, pushing some more propaganda on us because they don't do some false facts on us, and, you know, we didn't see the proper perspective to read between the lines.
First, I apologize to my son, and I apologize to my daughter for some of the things that I have believed and I have passed on to you. But the one thing, many things I did, I took my children, when I moved them to Virginia, my kids were always taught to strive to do their best. And the school was named George Wythe. They're here, they can tell you. The kids there were predominantly black. They celebrated D's and F's. Yes, they called them flags. I talked to the school and I told them, my children are not taught like that. My children need to go to a different school. The district in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, was wise enough to accept that they authorized sending my children out of their own school system to go into another school system because my kids were children that wanted to learn education. Other thing I want to say is, I'm grateful for all the men and young boys I see sitting in this room. Now that we know better, we can do better. If each one, they used to tell us, teach one. And there's enough of us in this room to impact many lives. My daughter will tell you, because often it's her in the car with me when I'm riding along in Roosevelt, and black kids spread across the street and won't let me by. I roll my window down, and I don't say, get your so-and-so out of my way. I say, excuse me, my little pretty brown babies. I said, I don't want you to get killed. I said, get your little butt out of the street. And they just start laughing and go about their business. Some of the kids that they term on my block, they term some of the worst kids. Instead of me looking at them like that, instead of us looking at kids like that, we need to embrace them. My daughter and son will tell you, I ran out of my house with a fever because people came on the block to attack some of the worst kids on the block. I wasn't having it. So if we, just as much as it took for us to implant all of this negativity into them that we learned, it's going to take 2 to 3 times more teaching, because it's hard to get over those stereotypes. But if each one reach out to the others in our communities, we can do it. We can do it.
Mark, the youth in Baldwin and the rate by which they graduate and go to college, and the rate by which youth in the old Bushwick High School graduate and go to college. And without offering any suggestions, I think thinking critically is also looking at the data when he says, 1.4 is going to college. What role does class play in that? And are we forgetting our brothers and sisters who might make a little less than some of us make in the room? Right. The second thing is, even when they talk about the 800,000 that is incarcerated, what is the relationship between the 800,000 and the percentage that we make up in this society? So if we make up only 12 to 15% of the society, that 800,000 is a significant number. Yes, sir. And it does not include, like this brother was saying, the young brothers and sisters who are arrested, who are innocent, who cop out, then got a charge, but they were not incarcerated. So because there's a significant number of young brothers and sisters who are getting cases because of stop and frisk, predominantly in the 5 boroughs that we don't really see in Long Island. And the last thing, just about this cohort stuff, they slated my school to close last year, predominantly using the cohort data, even though 90% of the students we take in every year, their cohort has expired when we take them in. So we might graduate 45 students. The New York City DOE counts our graduation at 13 students. So these are the kinds, so when you talk about numbers are used for people to pass these crazy laws and pass these crazy things that they do against teachers as if the teachers are the problem and the numbers are not the problem. So I just want to offer that in the spirit of thinking critically.
You guys don't realize, but Brother Tabari is a teacher at a school that's not your traditional high school. I guess they used to call them an alternative high school. So his students, you don't just come out of middle school and just go to his school. You usually go to his school because you had a problem at your high school, correct?
Correct.
So therefore, them counting his students as 13% and all that, it's a very weird scenario when you look at this data, because it doesn't apply to his school, and they're in a battle every year to keep their school open. Because I'm of the mindset, if you take a bunch of people, and I was in a program at Hofstra University, the NOAA program, and the program was kind of designed that you were there because you weren't quote unquote college material. So they would bring in students, and something like 50% of the students that came in the program graduated in 4 to 5 years. So a lot of people took this information. I remember my mentor, Dean Frank Smith, was the dean of this program, the one who was hammering critical thinking to me. And so he had me think about it differently. Now, 50% are graduating from Hofstra when these kids come in. So a lot of people looked at this and said, well, the program is failing. It's not really working. Half the kids are coming in, they're not really getting out. But the interesting thing is that 100% of the kids that came in weren't supposed to be there in the first place. So actually 50% is phenomenal. Because really only about 2% probably should have been there. Technically none of them because they didn't belong there. So I learned early on the importance of critical thinking because you could look at this data and use it however you need to use it. And we have to learn to use things that favor us. No matter what it is, use it to favor us. Yes, sir. You, yes, sir.
Although you asked a very important question that I don't think anybody really in the room particularly answered, which was now that the information has been obtained, what are we going to do? And nobody really answered the question as to what is going to be done with the information that has now been obtained.
Each one.
And the first thing that came to my mind, the thought process, is probably nothing. But as I look around the room, I see that there are a handful of people in here that I personally have worked with on different issues within our respective community. And I know the diligent work that has been done. But I challenge each and every person that is here now, that just with the question that you posed, to let's get an answer. Because we can have a conversation and have another conversation without ever having a resolution. As far as having critical thinkers, I think we need a critical movement. And now needs to be the time when we have that critical movement as to pertaining to your question. Just wanted to make it.
And things of that nature. The film was good because it kept my child's attention. And the language that was used was not normally the language of a 14-year-old. So I really appreciated that. But I was particularly interested in what the teacher said. A lot of times, right, when we try to address our youth, we address them from our thinking. And it's hard to communicate with somebody when you don't know their language. And I don't think it's proper for you to just think you can tell somebody to pull up their pants without first establishing a relationship with them. If you don't do that, you have a problem. You might get hurt doing that. You understand? I'm from South Jamaica and I represent an alliance of street initiatives. King of Kings Foundation, Brotherhood Foundation, the OGYG movement, where we talk to that 800,000. That 800,000 is still a significant number. While I'm happy that we outnumber them in terms of our education and our young men being in college, 800,000 is alarming. That's not a place that we want to be. And I am a filmmaker, so I intend to use some of the information from this, but translate it in a more clear language for that hip-hop generation, that sagging pants generation. I want to tell the sister that we're having a DVD that's coming out called Hip-Hop in Detox. And in it, you can study the language of the youth. You'll be surprised if you say something to them that will click and you'll be able to communicate what it is you're trying to communicate to them if you speak their language. But if you take an arrogant, posturous position that I'm your elder, you need to listen to me, you're not going to get nothing but the proverbial middle finger. So I'm thankful, right, to be here and see a collective body of people that's concerned about our issues, but it should not be just a night of conversation. And we should get up and mobilize and do things. Thank you.
Now, I think we have to shut it down, but I will take one last one.
Because we brought our kids to the school.
Yes.
If I was a police officer or the president, I wouldn't put her in jail. I would just leave her alone. If she needs, because the school is her child, it's her, and if it's funny and whatever, and she puts it in the right school, that'll be fine with me. I don't care if she needs to put a kid in a better school.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing I want to say is thank you for coming to the African American Museum. And I didn't get a chance to look at the film when talking about statistics and critical thinking. But I want you to leave here tonight and ask yourself the question, talk about school PTA meetings and being concerned about your political leaders and what happens to you. Ask yourself the question, how many PTA meetings have I gone to?
Many secretaries.
Have you, now there may be some in here who have done it, but statistically, looking at the entire room, I would imagine less than 10% of us attend PTA meetings. And that's where your children are getting their education. Now, I know for a fact, after I've been around here for about 80 years of my life, July will be 80 years, and I've seen a lot of things happen. A young man asked me, I'm talking about one town in particular, in Inwood, Lawrence, New York, on Lawrence Avenue. 20 years ago, there were at least 20 black businesses. Today, none. The population hasn't changed that much. They still have black folks there and they have black needs, but we don't support our businesses. There's a black drugstore in Freeport. There are two black, right on the borderline of Roosevelt and Freeport. One right on the main street. I doubt very seriously if 10% of us do our business, our pharmaceutical business, with that black pharmacy. We got CVS, Walmart, all the Walmarts, all the other places we go to. We have black restaurants. We'd rather go to the white ones and spend our money there. So now, in talking about youngsters, as some of you know, I was an African-American police officer, detective. I do know for a fact that the method that I used to use cannot be used anymore. I used to take kids and grab them by the back of the neck, throw them in the back of my car, and take them home to their fathers. And they would take care of business. Today, if I touch one of the youngsters and take them home in the car, your parents want to sue me. For hitting one of you off for chastising or bringing your kid home to you. So let's start thinking some critical thinking here. What's important? Let's stop giving lip service to the fact that our youth are our future. And doing nothing about it and allowing your child to leave out of the house, as someone mentioned before, with his pants down, and you saying, well, nothing is a fad. Let's get along. Let's let it happen. Too many of us are too afraid of our youngsters, our children. Now, at the African American Museum, I spend my time here for the sole purpose of preserving African American culture and history. This past year, we had the most progressive racial voter repression that we've ever seen. It didn't start last year. It started in 1840 in New York, and it's continued. And we let it happen because we do not attend public meetings dealing with politicians. We only vote one big time when the president's election come around. We don't go to the local ones. Our mayors and legislators can do whatever they want to, sign bills that affect our personal lives here in Nassau County, and we don't even give a continental enough to go to the meeting and say, listen, this isn't enough. Turn off the television. Stop watching Oprah and watch something that's important as making sure your kids get an education. Make sure your taxes are spent and money is spent properly. So come out to the African American Museum and help us keep the doors of this institution open. Because if it closes, you're not going to get no money. They don't give us any money as it is right now. Every dime that we make here in this museum goes for programs and for exhibitions or exhibits. I don't get a dime. I spend my personal money to make this do, make this happen. So come out and support us. We don't have a friends group. You are the friends. Without you, there is no African American museum. You can let it close if you want to, but I'll do my darndest to make sure it stays open with your help. So now she's going to have the raffle, and I hope that lucky boy goes home. And I can be pretty proud again, too.